Let's get smarter together with the help of our lead-off panel. Luke Broadwater is back, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House correspondent for The New York Times. Jake Sherman returns, MS Now political contributor and, of course, co-founder of Punchbowl News. And McKay Coppins, staff writer at The Atlantic and an MS Now political contributor. Mr. Sherman, we turn to you first this morning. This is a hot mess, or it seems to be, between Trump and Republicans on the Hill. From the lawmakers' perspective, where do things stand after this meeting with Mike Johnson? Mike Johnson is Donald Trump's boy.
He is. That's true, Steph. Where do things stand? Well, the issue is the Save America Act, this voter ID and citizenship bill that House Republicans and Senate Republicans have been pushing for. Some have been pushing for many months. And that's the reason, at least that's the stated reason, why Trump didn't sign the housing bill, because he wants that passed. The problem is it doesn't have the votes in the Senate. And the idea here being that if they cause a crisis, if this is what the right thinks, if they attach it to a must-pass bill like the NDAA, which is the annual Pentagon policy bill, or FISA, the warrantless wiretapping bill, that the Senate will be forced to accept it. Of course, we know that's not true. They'll just vote down the bill. So at this point, what Anna Paulina Luna, who's kind of the ringleader here, has said is that she will agree to reopen the floor if the SAVE Act is included in the NDAA, the Pentagon policy bill, in the House. Now, they could do that in the House, and it would die in the Senate. It would put a lot of Republicans in a bad position in the House, just because the Save America Act rather includes an effective ban on mail-in balloting. So, and I think the question, Steph, that maybe you're uniquely qualified to answer, you have some insight into, is I do get the sense that there's some trepidation at the White House about the policy underlying the housing bill. I mean, Trump said the other day in the Oval Office that it will make people who own houses, their houses, less valuable. So Trump seems to have some trepidation about the underlying policy. So I'm not sure it was totally only about the SAVE Act, or rather, was it about the bill overall? So I think there are a lot of open questions here. And next week, the Senate is out. The House has its last week in session before the July 4th recess. And we'll have to see how all this shakes out beginning next Monday.
I don't know, Jake. I don't think individuals that own houses are what Donald Trump's top concern is. If there was any powerful voice, any lobbying group saying this doesn't work, it would be the type of private equity giants that buy huge swaths of homes up in different areas in this country. And because they own so many, individuals like you and me can't get in the game, and it does jack up rents for locals, not necessarily just your average homeowner, but just your average homeowner doesn't have Trump on speed dial. Private equity titans do. All right, Luke, let's take you to Trump. Does he think he's any closer to get anything he wants?
So my view of this is it's what Donald Trump's been doing for most of his second term, which is his primary goal is to assert dominance over the Republican Party, more so than actually having electoral success. If you look at a number of his policies and some of the actions he's taken in some of the primary elections around the country, he's much more interested in making sure that Republicans are loyal to him, they're listening to him. And for months, he's been saying you have to pass the SAVE Act before you can do anything else. I think at one point he said, don't even pass another bill, any other bill, until you pass the SAVE Act. And so, look, this housing bill would be an easy win, right? You could just say we're bringing down housing prices and have a big signing ceremony. But he would much rather show that he has dominance over the party than do something that would probably help get votes in the midterms.
McKay, let's get cute and talk history for a moment. We're 1 week away from America's 250th birthday. Alexander Hamilton once said that the judicial branch is by far the weakest of the three branches. But right now it seems like, or at least as of yesterday, it feels like the Supreme Court seems to be carrying out Trump's agenda far more than the boys and girls in Congress do.
Yeah, it's actually one of the more dispiriting things about the state of the U.S. government as we celebrate the 250th anniversary. You talk to scholars, you talk to historians, they will say that the way that things should be working is that the president advances an agenda. He kind of squabbles with, fights with lawmakers on the Hill who are supposed to be the most powerful branch of government. And then the Supreme Court weighs in on constitutional matters. Because the Congress has ceded so much of its authority to the executive branch, and because the executive branch is run by somebody who frankly governs purely by, as Luke just pointed out, pressure and threats, and not by coalition building, a lot of the big decisions in American life and politics have been left to the Supreme Court, which of course is very conservative. It's one reason that so many Republicans got on board with Donald Trump early on in 2015, 2016, despite all of his clear flaws. They cared about consolidating power in the judiciary, and they succeeded. I mean, look, that kind of Faustian bargain that a lot of social conservatives made 10 years ago, in some ways has really paid off. You see it again and again with the Supreme Court, not just this session, but in the last several years. The Supreme Court has delivered multiple big conservative wins that will outlast the Trump presidency.
All right, let's talk about Iran, Jake, where my Wall Street sources like to pretend that war is over. It's not. How much does this attack on a ship in the Strait change things? What are you hearing from lawmakers?
I think lawmakers are going to want retribution, at least some of them. I mean, some of them will just fall in line with whatever Donald Trump wants. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, Steph, the war is not over. I mean, the Pentagon just came to Capitol Hill this week to ask for $88 billion in supplemental funding, and 60 billion something of which would go to the Pentagon to replenish munitions, rebuild embassies that were bombed, do a whole host of things because of this war. Listen, there's a lot of skepticism about where these negotiations are heading and where they will end up. And I think this complicates it, right? Because the Trump administration wants people to think this is all over and they can move on. And this was just a little expedition that they've now finished. And I think that's becoming clear that that's not the case.
It is not. It wasn't, isn't, and is never going to be a little expedition, certainly not an inexpensive one. Here's the thing, though, McKay. J.D. Vance is insisting that the talks with Iran are so far so good and that Donald Trump has created incredible leverage for himself and the United States of America. Who believes this?
I don't even believe that J.D. Vance believes it, frankly. I mean, look, he's been in the rooms. I haven't. But the way that these talks have proceeded over the last, several weeks and months has repeatedly revealed that if J.D. Vance had the leverage that he needed to get this done, he would have gotten it done. It's also possible, look, that J.D. Vance just is not experienced enough, doesn't have the diplomatic firepower or experience to get a deal done. But I think the problem with Iran, the political problem with Iran, the conflict in Iran, is that it is exposing the incoherence of America first, right? This is, I think, going to determine the question that we've been debating for the last 10 years, which is, will this be remembered as the era of Trump or the era of Trumpism, right? Will Trump's ideology outlast Donald Trump's presidency, at least in the Republican Party? I think that the conflict in Iran has exposed the kind of insincerity of the nationalism, the isolationism, the ideas that Trump preached when he was first running for president, that we were not going to get entangled in more Middle Eastern wars, that we were not going to send military personnel into harm's way to help Israel, right? These were the talking points of Donald Trump's campaign. J.D. Vance got on board. A lot of other people in his generation did too. And now J.D. Vance is stuck holding the bag, trying to defend this conflict. And I think it's going to be a real pivot point in political history when we look back on this moment.
All right, one more topic. Another thing that Donald Trump didn't talk about on the campaign trail, but he's certainly focused on it now, D.C. renovations. Luke, you and your colleagues at the Times did an extensive analysis of where specifically Donald Trump is getting the money for all of his D.C. construction and renovation projects. What can you tell close, because so many from the get-go was Trump's paying for it, donors are paying for it. That's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, the short version is taxpayer dollars are being used in all these projects. So no matter how many times Donald Trump says we're paying, donors are paying for everything, or not one dime of taxpayer money will be used, that's just not true. Let's take the ballroom as probably the biggest example. He has said that it will all be paid for by the donors. But if you look at the spending documents and you look at what the Secret Service is saying, lots of parts of the ballroom are being paid for by taxpayer dollars, including the underground bunker underneath and including the hardening of various parts and all the security features. Then you look at some of the other big projects. You look at the Triumphal Arch. Donald Trump said that perhaps he would raise so much money that would be paid for, but taxpayer dollars are going to that as well. We know there's at least $1.2 billion in construction projects on the book, but it will probably be many times more than that because several of the projects, at least half of them, don't have a dollar figure yet. So we'll keep updating this tally as it goes. But we're seeing a spending spree on D.C. construction projects like never before by any president.